217 days we waited, and my goodness me, it was so worth the wait. Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2020. What a brilliant start to the season. One of the best races we have had for such a long time. An instant classic, the first of the season. I couldn't really have asked for much more. If you are new around here, feel free to subscribe. But let's crack on with it. We'll start off today's video looking at the grid. So spoiler warning as always, but I cannot wait to dive straight into this. Yesterday, your quick roundup. Valtteri Bottas pole position for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton qualified P2, but with a 3-place penalty, thanks to ignoring yellow flags late on in Q3, meant Max Verstappen would join Bottas on the front row. Lando Norris would start a career-best starting position of 3rd, the highest for McLaren since 2016 at this exact venue, with Jenson Button. Albon promoted to 4th, Hamilton 5th alongside Sergio Perez. The two Ferrari teammates for next year, Leclerc and Sainz on row 4, with Stroll and Ricciardo rounding out the top 10. All of the bottom 10 choose to start on the medium tyres, including Sebastian Vettel. Ferrari really struggling yesterday. The two AlphaTauris of Gasly and Kvyat 12th and 13th. Ocon returning to Formula 1 14th. The Haas pair, Grosjean and Magnussen on row 8. George Russell 17th. Two Alphas, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen. And Latifi on debut, P20. And what a Grand Prix it was. For those new around here, usually I like to do these reviews going through the order. Maybe we do the race rundown starting on lap 1, ending on lap 71. Goodness me, there was plenty of them today. But I think due to the amount of incidents and stories we had today, I'm going to start at the bottom, work my way to the top. But that is your last chance. If you've not seen the race, I would utterly recommend going to watch it. And don't watch the highlights, watch the whole thing. It was brilliant. But here is your results for race 1 of 2020, the Austrian Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas converting that pole position to the race win. Charles Leclerc, 2nd place for Ferrari. I didn't see that one coming after yesterday, but what a huge surprise, and what another incredible drive from Lando Norris, 3rd. Overall, it was Hamilton who crossed the line 2nd, but with a 5-second penalty, that final lap from Norris, ridiculous. Cannot wait to talk about his race a little bit later on. 4.8 seconds the gap between Hamilton and Norris, meaning Norris claims his first ever Formula 1 podium, the first British driver on the podium, well, first new British driver since Lewis Hamilton on his very first race in 2007. I mean, I really didn't see that one coming. I thought Norris would surprise a few people this year, but a podium in his first race, goodness me. Lewis Hamilton finished P4, I think a disappointing start to his season, that's for sure. Carlos Sainz, P5 for McLaren, meaning they have had an incredible start to the season. Sergio Perez was P6, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri, P7, then it's Esteban Ocon in P8. Antonio Giovinazzi scored his first ever Formula 1 point here last year, does one better this season, finishing P9, and Sebastian Vettel rounds out your top 10. I think every single one of them in that top 10 has got a story to tell. And the bottom half, well, as you can see on screen, only one driver in the bottom 10 actually finished the Grand Prix, and that's Nicolas Latifi. Bear in mind as well the amount of incidents we had. We could yet still see a few penalties trickle over in the aftermath of the Grand Prix, so there's still potential that Nicolas Latifi could score a point on debut for Williams. What a crazy race. Danny Kvyat retired so late on in the Grand Prix. We'll talk about him in a moment. Seemed nailed on for a double points finish for AlphaTauri today. Alex Albon also classified like Danny Kvyat, but also DNF'd from the Grand Prix. Another big story we've got to talk about involving Alex Albon and Lewis Hamilton making contact. And your non-classified drivers, Kimi Raikkonen, George Russell, both Haas cars of Grosjean, Magnussen, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. And what a day it was. It was so worth the wait. I mean, 217 days is a long time. There's no beating around the bush with that one. But I think pretty much from the very first lap to the last lap, there was something going on. I'll do a quick race rundown and then we'll go through each driver's day. But that opening lap, for the most part, was pretty clean. I think it was only Grosjean who lost a handful of positions, went very, very wide into turn 1. Still not quite sure what happened there. But apart from that, very racy on that opening lap. Lando Norris actually was the one really pushing, pressurising Verstappen for second place. And I think at the time a lot of us were excited to see the McLaren so quick on the opening lap. But in those opening 10 laps, they did start to drop back a little bit, holding off Perez, but was really losing out to both Red Bull cars and both Mercedes cars, but was doing a good job in those early stages. It was a story about Hamilton catching back up to the front until we had that first failure. Max Verstappen, I mean, he was doing a solid job, was on an alternate strategy to the two Mercedes. Was that the right call? Was it not? We will ultimately never know because we never really had a chance to see how quick that Red Bull was going to be. I suppose the only opportunity we had was through the eyes of Alex Albon, but he didn't have the upgrades that Verstappen had on the car this weekend, and also was on the same strategy as Hamilton and Bottas himself. So Max, a huge contender for the race win today. He'll be gutted, so frustrated that his Honda engine and Red Bull car gave up on him so early on in the Grand Prix as well. You could see he was trying to restart that car, trying to do everything in his power, but to no avail. Only a few laps later, we then had Daniel Ricciardo, he having a cooling issue on the Renault. No safety car called for that one, slowly trundled his way back into pit lane. But you could see how frustrating it was for him as well. He was having a really strong race, not on the levels of Verstappen, but certainly looking like he was going to pick up some points. Stroll followed suit about a lap later from Daniel Ricciardo, and Stroll, another driver who did such a good job yesterday, finally getting over the demons of not getting through to Q3, and the race, just like so many today, just out of his control. Real bad luck for Lance Stroll. And then the Magnussen incident happened. Brake failure for Kevin Magnussen while fighting with Esteban Ocon. Magnussen actually had a brilliant start to the race. Qualified down in 16th, out in Q1. Was disappointed yesterday, understandably so. Not only that he was out in Q1, but out-qualified by Grosjean. He wasn't particularly happy with that. But lap 1... brilliant. Probably had the best opening lap of any driver in the field. Got up to 13th, I think it was, ahead of both Alpha Tauris, Esteban Ocon, and was able to stay ahead of the likes of the two Alphas. Got in front of his teammate as well. Awesome job. But then, while we got into those almost pit stop phases, the brakes just gave way. And we'd already seen Grosjean had a spin himself just a little bit before. I mean, that was driver error. I'm not going to say that was brake failure, but that Haas car, not looking great. Qualifying pace wasn't brilliant, and race pace was better, but the fact that they've had both cars now retire with brake failures, that is a huge, huge issue. And they're going to definitely have to work on that over the week, because the one thing you don't want is brake failures. And the team are quite lucky that we're here in Austria and not at a circuit like Albert Park where there's nowhere near as much runoff. But that caused the first safety car. That caused the first real bits of drama. Sergio Perez and Lando Norris. Norris having a slow stop. Perez having an unsafe release. No penalty for that. It was a little bit on the edge, but Perez didn't squeeze. Norris did back off when he got to the end of the pit lane. So I'm kind of happy that they were quite lenient on that, the situation by the stewards. But at this point, the two Mercedes looked in control, and the only real change actually on the safety car restart was the fact that Lando Norris was overtaken by Sergio Perez, and we'll talk about what happened with Vettel in a moment. But after that, we had another retirement, Grosjean this time, another brake failure for Haas. I was a bit nervous when I saw Grosjean off in the gravel again. I thought he'd spun it again. He didn't have a great race, Roman. Went backwards on the opening lap, had that spin, got the black and white flag for going over and corner cutting too much. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of give him a bit of leeway in the sense that he missed the whole of first practice. But for a man of his experience, considering that he did well yesterday in qualifying, did really well actually yesterday in qualifying, race today wasn't good. Was one of the more rusty drivers, I would say, out there today. However, these are the kind of races that Haas just need to stay in it to score points, and ultimately they're a team that are going to be mightily disappointed with today. And not long after Grosjean retiring, you guessed it, we had another one. George Russell was driving a superb Grand Prix. And actually at the time, I was kind of thinking of giving him my overall driver of the weekend. Did a brilliant job yesterday in qualifying 17th and was up in about 12th place for the majority of the Grand Prix. But a gearbox issue, I believe it was, nothing to do with the Mercedes power unit, but the gearbox gave way and ultimately put pay to any chances of points. But race pace, really, really strong. And what was brilliant to see, I don't know if many of you picked up on this, I'm sure you did, George Russell fighting with Sebastian Vettel for a good 20 laps or so. What a crazy 12 months it's been. If you'd have said that this time last year, that a Williams could easily hold off a Ferrari, God, everyone would have laughed you away. I mean, Ferrari had their own issues today, sure. But Williams, I think that proves just how far they've come. And I think if Russell was in that race, could have nicked some points today, but another one, we will never know. But another safety car came out thanks to that issue with Georgie Russell. Kimi Raikkonen, though, decided as soon as that safety car ended, he wasn't fancying staying in the race. And actually, Alfa Romeo did what is known as a Haas and didn't put the tyres on properly with Raikkonen's second stop, I think that was. And Raikkonen's tyre said, goodbye, Kimi, flew off at the final corner. Another safety car straight away. Our next DNF late on in the race, Alex Albon. I mean, he was driving a strong Grand Prix. I'm not too sure it was quite driver of the day levels. He was the official driver of the day. Not too sure about that, but it was certainly a good performance from Alex and proving that he certainly deserves to be in that Red Bull car. And Red Bull nailed that strategy at the end of the race. I was convinced Albon was going to win, actually. The pace he was able to catch and overtake Perez under that first safety car before we had the next safety... before we had the next safety car for Kimi Raikkonen. The pace he was able to do that was ridiculous. Then he was able to catch Hamilton and overtake Hamilton. And then there was the incident. We might as well talk about it now while talking about Albon. Albon had the quicker tyres. Albon around the outside of turn 4. It's always going to be a difficult one, but he got a lot of that car past Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton was trying to turn in, but it was kind of already too late. Albon, for me, was enough of the car ahead to be in that position. Hamilton, I don't think what expected for the Red Bull to have so much traction as it did. We've seen all weekend cars, not only in F1, but F2 and F3, really struggle around the outside of turn 4. But Albon may have caught Hamilton off guard a little bit. Hamilton just clips the rear right tyre of the Red Bull. Albon sent spinning into the gravel. Ultimately, Hamilton receiving a penalty for that. But for Albon, far, far worse. What could have been a victory, what should have been a first ever podium in Formula 1. Sadly for him, it's the exact same story as Brazil. And ultimately, retiring from the Grand Prix with a few laps to go. Classified, but a DNF. No points for Red Bull in the opening round of the season. Danny Kvyat, just like Pierre Gasly, a really quiet day for him. There was that midfield pack, actually, which had the 2 AlphaTauris, Ocon, the 2 Haas cars for a period, Giovinazzi, Vettel and Russell as well late on. And they were kind of just doing their own thing. I was watching the timing board as best I could. And actually, I will just say, the directors did a much better job today of putting the midfield on TV. So, well done. I'd still love to see more, but much, much better job. Kvyat had a few scraps throughout the race. Ocon and Kvyat had a brilliant little fight for most of it. But going into turn 1, 2 laps to go, I think it was. Rear left just had given up, completely imploded on itself, broke the suspension, Kvyat off at turn 1, no safety car or anything like that. And I was thinking, you know what, if there was a safety car, that would have put Hamilton way down the order and Sergio Perez for those penalties. And that is your retirement list. We move on to your finishers. Nicolas Latifi. What a debut to be involved in. What carnage for Nicolas Latifi to be involved in. And so unlucky to not claim his first Formula 1 point this weekend. Did he have the pace? No. But did he stay out of trouble? Yes, and that's all he needed to do this weekend. Did have a crash in third practice in the morning of qualifying, but was able to get out in qualifying, wasn't a million miles away, and I think did a very, very respectable job this weekend. He's not there to be as good as George Russell. Yes, the team would love it, but he's there to be a solid driver. And I think that's exactly what he was this weekend, and ultimately stayed in the race and was so close to points. And again, if there is any kind of late penalties that we don't know about for Vettel, Giovinazzi, we may just see him sneak in, but I'm not quite too sure. Sebastian Vettel, though, not the best start to the season, was it? It really, really wasn't. Opening stint wasn't dreadful. Got past Daniel Ricciardo, was having a brilliant fight actually with Stroll and Ricciardo, and that was really fun to see. Lance Stroll fighting with two multiple Grand Prix race winners, but holding his own despite having engine issues. And it was kind of a good, I suppose, cornerstone and marker that Racing Point really do have the pace this year. However, after Stroll went in, we had a safety car a few laps later thanks to Kevin Magnussen. And on the restart, Vettel was looking racy, but in front it was Carlos Sainz looking even racier, trying to overtake Charles Leclerc. Vettel trying to get a little move on Sainz as a result, up the hill to turn 3, trying to make the best of Sainz being pushed wide by Leclerc, but Sainz did a lovely little switchback move on Leclerc, but Vettel went into the back of him. Almost did a spinella before he'd even hit Sainz, trying to get out the way, spun back around. No penalty, none needed though. The damage was already done to Seb's race, way down the back of the field. Kind of lucky to secure a point actually today, was not his best race at all, and kind of got stuck in that midfield. And what's funny is the man in front of him, Giovinazzi, he is the one that everyone was saying over the winter break is under a lot of pressure, but I'm sure it will have done him plenty of favours in front of Sebastian Vettel today. Good job from Giovinazzi. Again, I said it yesterday, proving that the progress he made last year at the end of the season wasn't a fluke. And today, a little bit like Latifi, just kind of kept it clean. Got overtaken by Raikkonen in the early stages, but kept with him. Wasn't miles off the pace. And 2 points for the team in what could be a crazy season. Good job. Esteban Ocon returning to Formula 1. Just like Latifi, what a crazy race to come back to Formula 1 with. Again, kept his nose clean, had some great fights with the two AlphaTauri cars, wasn't quite able to overtake Gasly at the end, the gap under a second over the checkered flag. But scoring points for Renault, that's a bonus, I guess, but behind his fellow Frenchman Pierre Gasly, both of them fighting throughout the race, but doing exactly what they needed to do. Gasly, actually, I was quite impressed with in that midfield, got ahead of that group very early on, had a few scraps early doors with his teammate and with Ocon, but was able to assert himself at the front of that pack in the lower end of the midfield. Vettel then had his incident and Gasly was able to get on the back of Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz. That fight that was going on, but ultimately the car didn't quite have the pace, but 7th, a very good points haul for AlphaTauri. Sergio Perez, these are the kind of races you expect Perez to be on the podium, but some mistakes very late on from Checo, very uncharacteristic of the Mexican driver, speeding in the pit lane. You don't see that very often. 5-second penalty pretty much put him off the podium no matter what, and also very clumsily left the door open for Lando Norris. Norris went for the move, totally fine, and Perez shut the door, so much so, contact with Norris. Norris pushed over the curb in, but Norris was able to gain and stay in front. But that was a bit clumsy from Perez. Again, you expect all drivers to be a little bit rusty, but I did expect better there from Sergio. But 6th place, again, I said it yesterday, they would be happy going into this weekend knowing they'd have 6th, but it really should have been a podium today. Not only 3rd, but perhaps even 2nd, considering where Leclerc was before a few of those incidents. Carlos Sainz, 8th to 5th, very good job. Very, very good job. Nice and racy with Leclerc at one stage in the race. Even had a great fight with his teammate. And if he'd have got past, could have been very well on that podium today. But played it safe. They were teammates, more than sensible to do so. But those 2 laps the two were fighting, it was brilliant to see. And I'm just thankful they didn't make contact because their relationship is so good. And I would have hated that to crumble today. But finishing 1 place behind the champ Lewis Hamilton, they'll take it. Hamilton, though, not his best start to the season, but was it really his fault? Was 100th away from pole position yesterday. I think got unlucky with that penalty. The FIA initially disregarded the request for him to get a penalty, but reviewed it this morning and gave him a 3-grid drop, which is a bit frustrating. And I'm sure Hamilton, that would have really geared him up for the race. And in the race, did a brilliant first stint, getting past both Red Bull cars, though. I mean, did he really get past Verstappen? Is that really fair to say? But got up to second after the safety car was right there with Bottas. But Mercedes having issues themselves with the gearbox and power unit, having to slow down, that can't have helped Hamilton at all. But it still seemed like second was in the bag. And then late on, I don't know whether Mercedes weren't quite as switched on as Red Bull, or it was track position, or they didn't have any spare soft tyres, but looked like Red Bull had nailed it, and Mercedes kind of caught napping with this strategy. Contact with Albon, again, it's kind of unlucky, the contact Hamilton made. The contact was so minimal, but enough to force Albon off onto the gravel and spin that car round. There was no malice in what Hamilton did, I do have to say that, but I do think the penalty was fair considering the extreme damage it did to Albon's race. And Hamilton off the podium once again here in Austria. But in front of him, Lando Norris. What a story, what a Grand Prix. Starting fourth, or qualified fourth, starting third, one better. And as I said earlier, fighting Verstappen on that opening lap, you could tell he wanted to get back to winning ways that we saw in Formula 2. Podium finishing ways like we saw in Formula 2. Not in his rookie season anymore, and a year where he's kind of got to assert himself as a team leader for McLaren for when Ricciardo comes in. That's exactly what he did today. Fighting as hard as he could all the way through the race. And there was one moment where he went for a move on Sergio Perez that pushed him back into the clutches of Leclerc, and that's ultimately when Leclerc got past. But Norris went back behind Leclerc. Sainz almost had a run. But those final stages, a brilliant overtake on Sergio Perez. Very opportunistic, actually, which I really wasn't expecting. Yes, it was a little bit clumsy at the end, but overall, really proving his racing instincts there. Very Ricciardo-esque, it reminded me of. And then that final lap of the race, fastest lap of the Grand Prix for Norris, just 2/10 in on that Hamilton penalty. First podium in Formula 1. Well-deserved, Lando. What a Grand Prix. What a weekend. Oh, I really can't heap enough praise on that young man today. Brilliant effort. Third youngest driver on the podium in Formula 1 history. I think the other two are Max Verstappen and Lance Stroll. So deserved. And for McLaren, they'll probably be a bit annoyed, and I did think this, Norris's first podium on that fake podium won't quite be as sweet, but he did do the classic Lando Norris jump up with the champagne bottle and smash it down, which was awesome to see, and his team radio was lovely to hear. What a great drive. In front of him, another driver actually, with a brilliant drive, really went under the radar. And I think for the more casual fan, or maybe a fan that doesn't actually watch the race or anything like this on YouTube, but just checks, just through the result or whatever on Sky Sports, BBC Sport, whatever, after the race. Seeing Leclerc second, they'll probably be like, oh, well, yeah, he was good last year, came second here last year. But what a stunning drive that was, to keep himself in contention, to make the moves when they needed to be done. Really mature, actually, and I think proving that he is ready to be that team leader at Ferrari next season. Miles better than Sebastian Vettel today. I thought earlier on in the weekend it would be Seb that would have the edge, but no. Leclerc was fantastic today, actually. Didn't put a foot wrong. Second place in what was yesterday the fifth fastest car. I think is a cracking job, and I think that's kind of going under the radar. Fair enough so, because Norris got his first ever podium in a McLaren, and we're used to Ferrari being on the podium. But that could be their last of the season, depending on how good these upgrades are in a couple of weekends' time. And your race winner, Valtteri Bottas, cracking job. Didn't put a foot wrong. There was a scare, of course, with those engine and gearbox issues. But ultimately, the flying Finn didn't put a foot wrong, and it's a victory royal in the first race of the season. As such, your Drivers' Championship looks like this. Valtteri Bottas, top dog, 25 points for Mercedes, followed by Charles Leclerc for Ferrari on 18. It's then McLaren and Lando Norris coming in close behind on 16 points. Hamilton on 12, Sainz, Perez, Gasly, Ocon, Giovinazzi and Sebastian Vettel on 1 point rounds out the top 10. Your bottom half, well, no points for anyone, but with Latifi for Williams in 11th place, I think that's all set to change over the next few weeks. What is fun to look at though, the constructors' standings. Mercedes, top dogs, McLaren, second, Ferrari, third. I'm really excited to see how this season goes. Haas and Red Bull, the only teams yet to score. So then, the final bits before I leave you today. Driver of the day, driver of the weekend. Yesterday, I gave it to Lando Norris. My two drivers of the day in the race, I'm going to give to Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. Both of them today, fantastic, very opportunistic. Leclerc, a much cleaner drive, but Norris, you could tell he really wanted it, and proving that you should never give up in Formula 1. And getting my driver of the day in qualifying and the race, Lando Norris is my driver of the weekend. Also shout out to George Russell, but ultimately that retirement has just kept him away from the leaderboard. And my race rating before we go, it's had a revamp this year, and for me, it's just a bit of me. Very spicy indeed. Our spicy race rating scale, it's got to be a 9 out of 10. Not quite the perfect 10, but very, very close. Absolutely loved it. It's not rotten, it's not plain, it's not tasty. It is a truly spicy start to the season. Formula 2 sprint race was also brilliant this morning. Drugovich taking victory, Delatraz and Tixham on the podium. Schumacher scoring his first points of the season. And my driver of the weekend, Robert Schwartzman, who also leads the rookie standings. But it's Callum Ilott with that feature race win, who just about holding off Schwartzman by 4 points. But of course, that will evolve over the next few weeks. Formula 1 is back, ladies and gentlemen. Next weekend, we return back to Austria. Fingers crossed it's as brilliant as today, but what a treat it was. Thank you all for watching. If you are new around here, feel free to subscribe to keep up to date with all of your Formula 1 2020 news reviews, all that good stuff. And I'll see you all next weekend for Formula 1 2020.